Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Because workbooks are designed to be viewed electronically, it can be hard to tell what your data might look like outside of Excel, for example, if you plan to print it or save it as a PDF. Luckily, there are several different ways to view and customize your layout. To get started, I recommend switching to Page Layout View using the command in the bottom right corner. This will help you visualize the final product as you make changes to your workbook. Next, go to the Page Layout tab on the ribbon. Here you'll find everything you need to modify your page orientation, margins, print titles, and more. For example, our current orientation is portrait or vertical, a good choice if your goal is to fit more rows on each page. I'd like to switch to landscape or horizontal so I can fit more columns instead. Just click the Orientation command, then choose Landscape, and you'll instantly see the change. There's still one column that's getting cut off on the right, but that's okay. If we adjust the margins, we should be able to fit all the columns on a single page. All you have to do is click the Margins command. Here you can choose one of the predefined sizes, or you can customize your margins depending on what you need. Just go back to the Margins command, but this time click Custom Margins. I'm going to make the left and right margins just a little bit wider at 0.5 inches instead of 0.25. When you're done, click OK, and your worksheet will be updated. You can also add headers and footers to your workbook to make the printed copy easier to read. In this example, we'll add a header by clicking the area here. This opens the Design tab for working with headers and footers. From here, you can easily add page numbers, today's date, and other information to your header or footer. All you have to do is click the command you want. How about page numbers? When you're done, click anywhere else in your worksheet to exit. Now the pages are numbered Page 1 and Page 2. Here's a tip: if your worksheet uses title headings, you can include them on each page to make the printed copy easier to read. For example, in this workbook, it would really help me to know what months these sales figures are for. Just go back to your title headings, then click the Print Titles command. Next, click the button next to the field you want to repeat. You can choose either rows or columns. The dialog box will collapse and your cursor will turn into a selection arrow. From here, select the data you want to repeat on each page. Then click the button again to go back to the dialog box. When you're done, click OK. Now my header row appears at the top of Page 1 and Page 2. There's one more thing I'd like to change about my layout. Notice how the data is split up so Page 2 only contains about 9 or 10 rows? I'd like more control over that. Instead of the last couple of rows, I want the data to be divided evenly, 20 people on each page. To do this, I'm going to switch to the Page Break Preview using the command in the bottom right corner. This makes it easy to review your page breaks so you can easily insert your own. Simply select the row below where you want the page break to appear. Then click the Breaks command and choose Insert Page Break. If we switch back to Page Layout View and zoom out just a little, we can see that the data is divided evenly between Page 1 and Page 2. Now you have all the tools you need to customize your page layout and prepare your workbook for printing or exporting.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Workbooks can be used completely electronically, but sometimes you need to print them too. It's important to understand the basics of printing, plus the other things you have control over, like what parts of the workbook to print and more. You'll find everything you need in the Backstage view under Print. Here you can adjust your settings, see a preview, and print your workbook all in one place. Now you could just enter the number of copies you want and click the Print button right away. But if you want more control over the finished product, you might want to take a look at the options below. If your workbook contains multiple sheets, The first thing you'll need to do is decide whether to print only the active sheets, which is the default print method, or the entire workbook. You can also narrow it down to just your current selection. Let's go back to my workbook so we can review how these options work. A worksheet is considered active when it's selected, like my 2012 worksheet is selected now. To print more than one worksheet but not the entire workbook, just hold Control on your keyboard while you click the sheets you want. Now Excel will print the worksheets for 2010, 2011, and 2012. But that's not what I want. The data I'm after is more specific, the sales records for the top 20 salespeople in 2013. I've already sorted that information from largest to smallest and marked the top 20 with a gold star. We don't want to print the entire worksheet because that would include more data than we need. Why don't we print a selection instead? Start by selecting the data you want to print, including your header row if you have one. Then go back to the print pane in the Backstage view. Watch the print preview closely and you'll notice it changes when we switch from Print Active Sheets to Print Selection. Now only my current selection appears on the printout, the top 20 salespeople for 2013. I do see some other things I'd like to address now, starting with the way the data fits on the printout. Right now, the last column is getting cut off because there isn't enough room on page 1. We can probably fix that by adjusting the scaling of the worksheet. Just open the menu here, and you'll find several different options to choose from. If we choose Fit Sheet on one page, Excel will shrink the printout to just the right size so it fits on a single sheet of paper. This can be a great way to condense your worksheet, but be aware that the text will become harder to read the more you scale it down. I think I'll switch back to no scaling, and to make the data fit, I'll adjust the margins instead. You can use the menu here to choose one of the predefined sizes, or you can click the Show Margins button in the bottom right corner of your preview. This feature makes it easy to customize your margins using the guides you see here. I'm just going to make them a little narrower by clicking and dragging. And now we can see all 8 columns without scaling the size of the worksheet. There are still several other options in the print pane that let you control collating, orientation, and paper size. But I think I'm happy with my worksheet the way it is. When you're ready, go ahead and click the Print button at the very top of the pane. Now you just have to wait for your worksheet to finish printing.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Remember using formulas to calculate math problems in school, like 2 plus 2 equals 4, or 2 pizzas times $10 equals $20? Excel can use these same formulas to work with numerical data in your spreadsheets, just like a calculator. Excel uses standard operators for its math equations, like a plus sign for addition, a minus sign for subtraction, an asterisk for multiplication, a forward slash for division, and a caret for exponents. You're probably used to seeing equations like 5 plus 5 equals, but in Excel the equal sign comes first. This is because the cell itself contains or is equal to the formula and its value. Let's create a simple formula to add up the budgets for June and July. I've already typed in those values, and the total is going to be $1,200 plus $1,500. But instead of typing in those numbers, we're going to use cell references. Start by clicking on the cell where you want the total to appear, and then type an equal sign, which is how you'll always start a formula. Then type the address of the first cell you want to add, which is B2, plus the second cell, B3. When you're done, press Enter on your keyboard, and Excel displays the value in the cell. Now you may be wondering why we used cell references instead of numbers. The main reason is that if you ever change the values in these cells, you won't have to retype the formula. Excel will automatically recalculate the answer so it stays up to date. You should generally use cell references in your formulas whenever you can. To edit your formula, you can double-click the cell. If you make a mistake or change your mind, you can press Escape on your keyboard, and it will go back to the way it was. Let's try another example. This time with multiplication. I want to calculate the total price for the plastic silverware, so I'll need to multiply cell E4 by F4. The formula is going in cell G4, so I'll click there and type an equal sign. This time, instead of typing the cell references, I'm going to use something called the point and click method. You may find that this is easier than typing them. Press the Enter key, and it calculates the answer. Finally, I want to show you a quick way to add a formula to several cells at once. Instead of typing formulas for each of these 3 cells, you can select the first one, and then locate the fill handle in the lower right corner of the cell. Click and drag the fill handle down, and when you release the mouse, it will automatically enter the formula into these cells. Now we can see the total cost for each item. This is a great shortcut to use when you want to have similar formulas on each row. Once you're comfortable creating formulas, you'll use them all the time because they really are one of the most powerful and convenient features of Excel.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
You may already have some experience creating simple formulas that have only one type of operation. But sometimes you have to create more complex formulas that do have more than one operator, for example, addition and multiplication. To do this, you'll need to understand how Excel is calculating the answer. Excel uses a set of rules called the order of operations, which you might remember from math class. The order of operations determines which parts of the formula to calculate first. The very first thing that you calculate are the items in parentheses. Then, if you have any exponents, you'll calculate those. Next is multiplication and division. And finally, addition and subtraction. Excel knows to use the order of operations whenever it calculates a complex formula. It's important that you remember it so you can create formulas that'll give you the correct answer. To remember the order, you can just use the acronym PEMDAS. Or to make it even easier, remember the phrase, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." Let's go over each of these in a little more detail. In this formula, 5 plus 2 is in parentheses. So we'll calculate that first to get 7, and then we can just multiply 3 times 7 to get 21. This formula contains an exponent, 3 to the power of 2. We'll need to calculate that first, and then we can do the addition. If you have multiplication or division, that'll come next. Here we multiply 2 times 4 to get 8. and 9 minus 8 equals 1. Now multiplication and division are considered to be on the same level. That means if you have both of them in your formula, they're calculated from left to right. In this example, we'll do the division first, and then the multiplication. If we wanted the multiplication to happen first, we could just put it in parentheses, or we could rearrange the formula so the multiplication was on the left. Finally, we have addition and subtraction. Just like multiplication and division, these are on the same level, so we'll calculate them from left to right. Okay, now let's put them all together. This formula may look really complicated, but we're just going to go step by step through the order of operations, and you'll see that it's really not that bad. We'll start with the parentheses. We'll calculate each of these to get 2 and 3. And as you can see, the formula's already starting to look a bit simpler. Next, we'll look to see if there are any exponents in this formula. There is one, 2 to the second power. When we calculate it, it becomes 4. Next, we'll do the multiplication and division, going from left to right. And now all that's left is addition. And that gives us our answer, which is 8.75. And that's the same answer Excel would give you if you entered that formula in your worksheet. Now I'm going to show you why it's so important that you follow the order of operations every time. If you don't, your formulas won't give you the correct answer. In this example, I'd like to add these 3 values and find out how much the sales tax will be. I'll start by typing the equal sign, which is how you always start a formula. Then I'll calculate D3 plus D4 plus D5. Next, I'll multiply by 0.075, which is the tax rate at 7.5%. Now, this may look like it's going to give us the correct answer, but it's not. That's because we didn't follow the order of operations. Remember, multiplication comes before addition, so Excel is going to multiply D5 by 0.075 first. Then it'll add D3 and D4, which isn't what we want. We want these 3 values to be added first. So to do that, we just need to put them in parentheses. Parentheses are often the best way of controlling which parts of the formula are calculated first. And when this formula is calculated, we can see that the answer is $20.56. So whenever you're doing a complex formula, just remember to follow the order of operations. Then you'll get the correct answer every time.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
There are 2 main types of cell references in Excel, relative and absolute. Both behave differently when copied to other cells, either as part of a formula or a function. Relative references are the default, and probably the type you're going to use for most of your formulas. In this example, I need to know the total cost of each menu item on the invoice. To do this, I'll need to multiply the values in these 2 cells. I'll just enter my formula here. Start by typing the equal sign, and then the formula will be B4 times C4. When you're done, press Enter on your keyboard. Now if I use the fill handle to copy this formula to all of these cells, we can double-click each copy and see that the cell references have changed automatically. So we have B5, B6, B7, and so on. That's because these are relative references. In other words, when Excel looks at our original formula, what it actually sees is the location of the cells relative to the location of the formula. That means in this case, it's looking at the 2 cells to the left of our current location, and those just happen to be B4 and C4. Each copy is also looking at the 2 cells to the left of the formula. This technique is useful because it means we can copy the formula as we did here, and the cell references will sort of move along with it. The references don't even have to be in the same row. They can be anywhere in the sheet. There may be times when you don't want the cell references to change. Take this version of the invoice. I've added a column where we can list the sales tax for each item. We should be able to enter our formula here, then copy it to the rest of the list. To get started, I'm going to enter B4 times C4 in parentheses. Then I'm going to multiply by cell E2, which contains our tax rate at 7.5%, which is the same as 0.075. Next, I'll use the fill handle to copy the formula to the rest of these cells. But wait, that doesn't look right at all. It's even affecting the formulas in the rest of the worksheet. The first copy of our formula is correct because it's multiplying by E2, which contains our tax rate. But as we go down the list, we can see that the reference is moving in relation to the cells, which isn't what we want. We want it to stay frozen on E2 for each copy of the formula, and for that, we'll need to use an absolute reference. Absolute references have a $sign placed before the column, row, or both to keep them from changing when you copy the formula to another cell. To keep the column and the row from changing, place a $sign in front of both. To keep only the row from changing, place a $sign in front of the row only. To keep only the column from changing, place a $sign in front of the column. Most of the time, you'll be using the first type of absolute reference, the one where there's a $sign before the column and the row. Let's go back to our example and add $signs before the column and the row to make E2 an absolute reference. Now if we copy the formula to the rest of this list, the errors go away and we're left with the correct sales tax for each item. The relative reference is different in each cell, but the E2 reference, our absolute reference, stays the same. Finally, I'd like to show you how to create cell references across different worksheets in the same workbook. This can be useful if you want to create a formula on one worksheet that references a value from another. It works the same as a normal reference. You just have to include the name of the worksheet along with the cell address. So to get started, figure out what cell you want to use, then take note of its location. In this example, we're going to use cell E14 on the worksheet menu order. Next, switch to the worksheet where you want to use the reference. As you can see, I already have a formula that's calculating the total of all these services. I just need to add the total for the menu order in this cell here. To reference the cell, type the name of the worksheet first, then an exclamation point, and finally the cell address. If the worksheet name includes a space, like in this example, you'll need to add single quotation marks around the name. When you're done, press Enter, and Excel will pull the value from the other worksheet. That means if cell E14 ever changes on the menu order worksheet, it'll be updated here too. Mastering cell references is the key to creating formulas that work for you and your data. Now you know how to use relative references, absolute references, and references across multiple worksheets.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Functions are a great time-saving option for calculating data in your worksheet. They can be used in place of formulas when a formula would be too long or just too complicated to write out manually. To access the function library, go to the Formulas tab on the ribbon. Here you'll find hundreds of functions to choose from. They've all been organized into categories to make them easier to find. For example, under Financial, you'll find functions that deal with things like interest and monthly payments. Under Text, you can perform text manipulations, like converting lowercase to uppercase, replacing text, and more. Date and Time includes functions that return the current date, time, day of the week, and other useful data. Some of the most common functions are pretty simple though, like sum and average. You can access these using the drop-down arrow under AutoSum. In this example, I'd like to add these 10 cells to calculate the total. If I tried to create a formula for that, I'd have to add each cell individually. Not only would that be tedious, it would also make the formula really long, especially if I had, say, 100 cells that I wanted to add. So instead of creating a formula, I'm going to use a function. First, select the cell where you want the answer to appear. Then choose a function. In our case, we'll open the AutoSum menu, and then choose Sum. Now Excel has inserted the function and also selected the cells that are being added together. If it selects the wrong cells, you can always change that by dragging the corner handles here. When you're done, press Enter on your keyboard, and the answer will appear. Let's look at this function in a little more detail. Just like formulas, functions always start with an equal sign. But you may have noticed that there are no mathematical operators, such as addition or subtraction, like you would normally see in a formula. Instead, functions use a specific syntax that includes the name of the function, followed by one or more arguments in parentheses. The arguments tell the function which cells or numbers to use when calculating the result. In this example, we only have one argument, even though there are two different cell references. This is called a range of cells, or a cell range. A cell range is represented by two different cell references with a colon in between. In this case, the range consists of all the cells between D3 and D12. If you want to use more than one argument, you'll need to separate each one with a comma. Let's try a different function now. In this example, we have a column for the date that each item was ordered and the date that it was received. What I'd like to know is how many business days it took for each item to be delivered. First, select the cell where you want the function to go. Then choose a function if you know what category it's in. If you don't, you can try searching for it instead. Just click the Insert Function command on the far left of the ribbon. Searching for functions can be tricky, but for more experienced users, this can be an extremely useful tool. Just type a description of the function you're looking for. I'm looking for something that'll count the number of days that have elapsed, so I'll type count days and then press Enter. We've gotten a lot of different results here. To learn more about a function, just click the name, and a description will appear below. The function called net workdays returns the number of workdays between two dates, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm just going to click OK, and another dialog box will appear. There will be separate fields for each argument in the function. This function has up to 3 arguments: start date, end date, and holidays. When you click a field, you'll see a description of it below. And if you need more help, you can click the link that says Help on this function. For the start date, I'm going to select cell E3. And for the end date, I'll select F3. We know the holidays argument is optional because it's not in bold, so I'm going to leave that one blank. Before you continue, you can check the result of the function here. When you're ready, click OK, and the function will be added to the worksheet. Just like with formulas, you can copy the function using the fill handle here. And now we can see the number of business days it took for each item to be delivered. If you've never used functions before, the syntax may seem a little strange at first. But with some practice, you're bound to get the hang of it, and soon you'll be using your favorite functions over and over.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Excel worksheets can have a lot of cells, and sometimes you may find that you want to view two different parts of the spreadsheet at the same time. For example, in this spreadsheet, I have a list of salespeople in the first column, but when I scroll to the right, those names disappear, which makes it really hard to see who the sales data belongs to. We can fix this by freezing the first column so it will always stay visible. First, go to the View tab and click Freeze Panes. You have a few different options, but we just want to freeze the first column. Now when we scroll, we can easily see the names of each salesperson, no matter where they are in the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet also has dates in the second row, and I'd like to freeze them so they'll stay visible when I scroll down. But this time it's going to work a little bit differently because it's row 2, and you can see why if you go to the Freeze Panes command. There's an option to freeze the top row, but there isn't an option to just freeze the second row by itself. Instead, we'll need to freeze the top 2 rows. Since we've already frozen the first column, we'll need to reset the spreadsheet by selecting Unfreeze Panes. And now you have two options. You can either select the row below the rows that you want to freeze, or you can select a single cell, such as B3. If you only select one cell, it will freeze the rows above it and also the columns to the left, and that's exactly what we want. Next, go to the Freeze Panes command and select Freeze Panes. And now you can see a thin line in between rows 2 and 3, and also a line between columns A and B. When I scroll, I can see all of my header rows and columns, no matter where I am in the spreadsheet. Sometimes you may need to work with two different parts of the spreadsheet at the same time. There are a couple of ways to do this. One way is to click the New Window command. This will give you two separate windows, and you may need to drag the top of each window so you can see both of them. Both of these worksheets are showing the same file, and we can use it to view two different parts of the worksheet. Or if the workbook has multiple sheets, you can view two of them side by side. So I could view the 2010 sales in one window and the 2012 sales in another, which makes it very easy to compare the 2 years. If you want to go back to just viewing one window, you can close either one by clicking the Close button in the upper right corner. And then you can resize the window or click the Maximize button. Another way to view two different parts of a worksheet is to use the Split feature. This is a little bit like freezing panes, except instead of freezing them, you can actually scroll each section individually. First, if you have any frozen panes, you'll need to unfreeze panes. Then select the cell where you want the split to appear, usually somewhere near the middle. And then click the Split command. You can now see that there are vertical and horizontal dividers. There are also 4 scroll bars which you can use to scroll the different sections. Now you may find that this view is a little too cluttered, but you can make it simpler by removing one of the dividers. If you drag the vertical divider all the way to the left, it will disappear and you'll just have a horizontal divider. By scrolling the top and bottom sections, we can compare the data for any 2 salespeople. For example, David Carlson and Melissa Post. Depending on the spreadsheet, some of these view options may be better than others. In this example, the header rows and columns are really important, so the Freeze Panes feature is probably the best choice. You'll just have to try all of the view options to see which one works best for your spreadsheet.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
When you have a lot of different rows in your spreadsheet, you may want to sort the data so you can view it more easily. Sorting can reorder things alphabetically, numerically, by date, or even by color. Depending on your preference, you can either sort from the Home tab using the Sort and Filter drop-down menu, or you can use the commands in the Data tab. In this example, I have a worksheet with a list of t-shirt orders, and I'd like to sort it alphabetically by last name. Just select any cell in the column that you want to sort, and then click the Ascending command. It's the one that says A to Z. You'll notice that when you sort one column, Excel also reorders the other columns so that each row still has the correct information. If we wanted these in reverse order, we could click the Descending command, the one that says Z to A. Now this method doesn't always work if your worksheet has an unusual layout. Watch what happens when I try to sort the data here on the right. The header row is included in the sorting area by mistake. In a situation like this, you might need to manually select the cells you want instead of relying on Excel. This is called sorting a cell range. To get started, select the range you want to sort, including the header row if you have one, then click the Sort command, and a dialog box will appear. Use the drop-down menu on the left to choose the column you want to sort by, then select a sorting order. In this example, we'll choose largest to smallest. When you're done, click OK, and the range will be sorted by the selected column. Notice that the rest of the worksheet wasn't affected by the sort. Sometimes the default sorting options won't work for what you have in mind. For example, if we sort the column that contains the t-shirt sizes in ascending order, the order will be large, medium, small, then extra large, because the column is being sorted alphabetically. It would be better if the sizes were listed in a more logical order. In other words, small, medium, large, then extra large. For this, we'll need to create a custom sort. To begin, click the Sort command, and on the right you can see that it's ordering the column from A to Z. If we click this drop-down menu and select Custom List, we can enter the t-shirt sizes in the order that we want. So I'll click the box and start typing small, medium, large, and extra large, and I'm pressing Enter after each one. Then click the Add button. Make sure that your list is selected over here on the left, then click OK to confirm, and OK again. And now the worksheet is ordered the way that we want. The only problem with this is that every other column is completely out of order. What I would really like is if the homeroom numbers were more organized within each size. I can do this by sorting multiple levels. This will let us sort first by t-shirt size and then by homeroom. Click the Sort command, then click the button that says Add Level. And now we just have to select the homeroom column, and we'll leave the other two fields the way they are, sorting the values from smallest to largest. When you click OK, you'll see that within each t-shirt size, the homeroom numbers are listed in numerical order. If we wanted to sort by homeroom first and then by t-shirt size, we could go back to the Sort dialog box, select one of these rows, and then use the arrows to change the order. To get the results you want, sometimes you need to create multiple levels or incorporate different types of custom sorting. Let's take a look at one more example. You may have noticed that some of the cells in this column are colored red, indicating that there's a problem with the student's payment. We can make sure that these appear at the top if we sort the worksheet by cell formatting. To do this, click the Sort command again. I want to continue using the sort options that we've just set up, so I'm going to add a new level for the payment method column. I'm also going to move it to the top of the list so that sort happens first. To sort by cell formatting, go to the drop-down menu under Sort On. Here, in addition to values, you can choose cell color, font color, or cell icon. Next, make your selections in the order field depending on what you have in mind. In this example, we want all the red cells to appear on top. When you're ready, click OK. Now we can easily see which orders still have outstanding payments. There are a lot of different ways of sorting your data depending on how you want to organize it, so take some time to experiment with the different options to find the ones that best suit your needs.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Filtering is a great feature of Excel that gives you a lot of control over which parts of your worksheet are displayed. You can use it to show only the information you need or find something specific while hiding the rest of the data temporarily. Now it's important that you have a header row because the filtering tools actually get added to the cells in the header row. In this example, I have an equipment checkout log, and there are a lot of things to keep track of, so I'd like to use some of the filters to simplify it. First, go to the Data tab and click the Filter command. And you'll see these drop-down arrows added to your header row. These are what you'll use to access all of the filtering options. Here you'll see a list of all of the different values that appear in this column. I'd like to just view the laptops and projectors, so I'll uncheck this box to quickly deselect everything, then check Laptop and Projector. Click OK, and now the drop-down arrow has changed to a different icon to show that there is a filter in this column. We can narrow down this data even further by adding another filter to a different column. Let's filter by the date that the items were checked out. This shows all of the months that appear in this column, so I'll uncheck the months that I don't want, then click OK. To get rid of any filter, just click the icon again and select Clear Filter. So that's how you do simple filtering. And now let's look at some more advanced techniques. Using the same menu, we can also search for values that appear in this column. In this example, a lot of our equipment is made by a company called Ceres. So if we enter that here, Excel will look for a match anywhere in these cells, and then list only those results below. To apply the filter, just click OK. For a little more control, you can use text filters instead. You can access these from the same menu under Text Filters. Here you can filter information that fits more specific criteria, for example, cells that contain a certain number of characters, or data that doesn't contain a word that you specify. In this example, we're going to choose Does Not Contain, and then enter Laptop to exclude anything that contains this word, including laptops and laptop travel bags. Click OK, and Excel will refilter the data. Next, let's say I only want to show items where the ID number is between 3000 and 6000. I can click the drop-down arrow and go to Number Filters. There are a lot of different options here, but for what I need, I'm going to choose Between. Now I can type in whatever values I want in these two fields. So this will show rows that are greater than or equal to 3000 and less than or equal to 6000. Click OK, and now all of these values are between 3000 and 6000. Date filters are really cool because they can display data from a certain time period, such as last year, next quarter, between two dates, and more. In this example, I'd like to find out which items were checked out this week. All you have to do is go to Date Filters, and you'll find many options to choose from. I'll select This Week. At this point, we have 3 different filters applied to the worksheet, so it's filtering out most of the items and just showing the ones that meet all of the criteria. If you'd like to remove any of the filters, you can clear them one by one like I showed you before, or you can turn off filtering altogether. Just click the Filter command again. As you can see, filtering can narrow things down really quickly, and it gives you so many different options you can probably find a use for it with any worksheet.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Tables are a great way to add more advanced formatting to your worksheets, like banded rows, preset color schemes, and other design elements that can save you tons of time. Let's take a look. To create a table, all you have to do is select the cells you want to include, then click the Format as Table command on the Home tab. Here you'll find several different styles to choose from. Just pick whichever one appeals to you the most. You can always choose a different table style later. If you want your table to have special formatting in the header row, make sure you leave this box checked. You can also change the selection if you need to. When you're ready, click OK, and now we have a table. Notice that every table includes filtering by default, which will let you sort your data or narrow it down depending on what you need. You can apply filtering anytime using the drop-down arrows here. If you need to fit more content into your table, not to worry. Excel gives you 2 ways to add more columns or rows in the same style as the rest of the table. Just select a cell in the last column or row, then start typing in a new cell, or you can click, hold, and drag the bottom right corner of the table to create any size you need. This is looking pretty good. I think I'm ready to try some different formatting options now. For that, you'll find everything you need on the Design tab, which appears anytime you have your table selected. Remember how I said you could change your table style once you added one to your worksheet? You can do that here using the options in the Table Styles group. And this time you get a preview. This is one of the benefits of using tables in Excel. They make it easy to change the look and feel of your worksheet, and it's a lot faster than formatting the cells yourself. Why don't we go with this one? Next to the table styles, Excel gives you a few more options for customizing your table. For example, you could add special formatting to the last column to make it stand out, or you could add a total row. These will all look slightly different depending on the table style you've chosen, so you might need to experiment to get the look you want. If you change your mind, you can always remove the table from your workbook without losing any of the formatting or the data. You will lose some functionality though, like table styles and filtering, so keep this in mind before you go through with the steps. All you have to do is make sure your table is selected, then click Convert to Range on the Design tab. Next, click Yes to confirm, and the range will no longer be a table. The Design tab has disappeared, but you can still adjust the formatting manually using the options on the Home tab. Now you know how to add and remove tables in Excel.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
When working with numerical data in Excel, sometimes a chart is just what you need to show the meaning behind the numbers. In this video, we're going to look at some of the different types of charts and also some ways that you can customize them to best represent your data. Column charts are good all-around charts. They work with many different types of data. Whereas line charts are best for showing trends over time. Pie charts are unique because they let you see your data in proportion instead of on a graph. We also have the bar chart, which is basically just a column chart turned on its side. And finally, area charts, which are similar to line charts, except the areas under the lines are filled in. In this example, I have a table of sales figures for a bookstore. They're organized by genre and year, but it's hard to see any trends without looking at the numbers one by one. A chart would make things much easier. To create a chart, select your data, including any headers that you want to use. Then go to the Insert tab and look to the commands in the Charts group. For this data, I think I'll go with something in the column category. This one looks nice and simple. Okay, this is a lot clearer. Now I can see that sci-fi and fantasy have the strongest sales with an all-time high in 2009. How do I know this column is from 2009? Well, below the chart, there's a type of key called a legend, and this tells us what each color represents. Right now, the columns are grouped by genre, but you might prefer to see them grouped by year instead. There's an easy way to make this change. Just make sure the chart is selected, then click Switch Row/Column on the Design tab. See how the chart has been rearranged? Basically, it's the same data, but the years and the genres have switched places. You can always experiment with this to see which option is going to work best for your data. If you want to try a different chart altogether, click the Change Chart Type command on the far right of the tab, then pick something else from the dialog box. I think I'll go with a line chart this time. Line charts work well for data like this. For example, we can see right away that romance novels are starting to catch up to sci-fi and fantasy, but mystery sales have stayed consistently low. If you want, you can change the chart style to give your chart a different look and feel. As you can see, you have several different options to choose from. You can also change the chart layout itself. Just go to the Quick Layout command and make a selection from the menu. Not all of these options will work well for the data in your chart. Just keep going until you find something you like. Why don't we go with something a little bit like this? You can make further adjustments using the Add Chart Element command or the Chart Elements shortcut. Just look for the button with the plus sign. Here you can add or remove elements from your chart depending on your preferences. Or you can click the arrow to the right to access even more options. To edit one of your chart elements, like the chart title in this example, all you have to do is select the placeholder, then replace the text. Finally, whenever you insert a chart, it appears on the same sheet as the source data by default. If you want, you can move it to a different worksheet by following these steps. First, make sure your chart is selected, then click the Move Chart command. Next, select the sheet where you want the chart to go. In this example, we'll choose New Sheet. When you're ready, click OK, and now the chart appears in whatever location you chose. Charts are a great tool for presenting numerical data and also enhancing your worksheets in Excel. With so many options to choose from, you can achieve exactly the result you want.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
There may come a time when you're collaborating on a project and you want a friend or coworker to make some changes to your workbook. In this example, I'm creating a schedule for a company retreat, and I want my teammates to fill in some of the blanks and possibly make some corrections. There are two features in Excel that'll make this a lot easier: track changes and comments. You can access both of them on the Review tab. First, click the Track Changes command, then choose Highlight Changes. Next, check the box where it says Track Changes while editing. This will turn the feature on. You can also limit what types of changes are highlighted, but I want to highlight them all, so I'm going to leave these settings the way they are. Make sure the box next to Highlight Changes on Screen is checked, then go ahead and click OK. If Excel asks to save your workbook, just click the button to save and continue. And now we can start making some changes. Let's say I'm a coworker and I want to add some information to the schedule. When I do that, the cell gets this little triangle in the corner and also a border. If you or anyone else mouses over the cell, you can see exactly what was changed and also who made the change. This makes it easy to keep track of multiple edits. This workbook now has several different track changes. So many that I think they'd be easier to read if they were listed on a separate worksheet. To do this, you'll need to save your workbook first, then click the Track Changes command, and choose Highlight Changes. Next, check the option that says List the changes on a new sheet. Then click OK. A new sheet will appear with a list of all the changes in the workbook. Now we can easily review the edits and also see which cells they're in. Right now, the changes that we've made are sort of temporary, meaning they aren't officially part of the workbook yet. To make them permanent, we need to accept or reject them, depending on what we want to keep. First, go to Track Changes, then choose Accept or Reject from the menu, and a little dialog box will appear. I want to look at all of the changes that haven't been reviewed yet, so I'm going to leave this first option checked. You could also narrow it down to who made the change, or to a specific range of cells. Click OK when you're ready. You'll be able to review each change and then accept or reject them one by one. I know I want to keep all the changes in the workbook though, so I'm going to choose Accept All. Now the changes are permanent. However, the markup won't go away until we turn Track Changes off. We'll get back to that in a minute. Another useful feature for collaborating on workbooks is the Comments feature. For example, say I want to leave a note or a question about this item without actually changing what's in the cell. We can do that by selecting the cell, then clicking the New Comment command. Now just type your comment here and click anywhere outside the box when you're done. Comments will show up as a little triangle in the top right corner of the cell. Mouse over the cell, and you can easily read the comment. If you want to view all of the comments at once, there's a way to do that too. Just click the command that says Show All Comments. You can use the same command to hide them again. You can even edit the comments in your workbook, for instance, to update something you said, or maybe to reply to someone else. Just select the cell you want, then go ahead and click Edit Comment. I think I'm finished with the schedule now, so I'm going to delete all the comments by selecting each one and then clicking the Delete command. I'm also going to turn off Track Changes, which will finally remove the markup that you can still see here. All you have to do is go to the Track Changes command, then highlight Changes. Now uncheck the box that says Track Changes while editing. Once you do this, all the track changes in the workbook will be accepted automatically, so make sure you're ready for that before you continue. Click OK, then click Yes to confirm, and now you're all set. All of these features can be a big help when it comes to collaborating on workbooks. They make it easy to keep track of revisions and communicate ideas back and forth, so you can work on the same file with anyone you want.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
There are a couple things you can do to prep your workbook before you send it out. For example, first, you might want to run a spell check. Then you can finalize the file and even protect it to keep other people from making any more changes. To run a spell check, go to the Review tab, then click the Spelling command. A dialog box will appear where you can type the correct spelling yourself, or you can choose one of the suggestions, then click Change. Now, spell check isn't perfect. Sometimes it'll say a word is spelled wrong when it isn't, like people's names, business names, and other proper nouns. If that happens, you can ignore the error, or you can click Add to Dictionary. This will save the word so it never comes up as a spelling mistake again. And it looks like that's it. Now that we're done with our spell check, we can move on to the next step, finalizing the file itself. You'll find everything you need in the Backstage view under Inspect Workbook. This feature can help you remove any personal info that may be hidden in the workbook's file data. It'll also check for things that you generally don't want in the final draft, for example, comments or annotations that you forgot to delete. Some of the changes from the inspector can't be undone, so it's a good idea to save an extra copy before you continue. When you're ready, go ahead and click Check for Issues, choose Inspect Document from the menu, then click Inspect in the dialog box. The results will appear with an exclamation mark next to anything that might contain sensitive info. In this example, it looks like there are some hidden document properties and personal information, and also some comments that we definitely don't want in the final draft. To remove an issue, just click the button to the right that says Remove All, and Excel will take care of the rest. I'm also going to remove the personal info the inspector found, just because the people I'm sharing with don't really need access to it. When you're done, click the Close button. Okay, so our workbook has been finalized. Now we can protect it to keep people from making any further changes. This step is optional, but it's a great way to control who's allowed to view or edit your work. All you have to do is click the Protect Workbook command and make a selection from the menu. Some of these options offer a high level of protection, such as Encrypt with Password, which is good for really important or sensitive workbooks. If you don't need that much security, though, you might want to consider one of the other options. In this case, I'm going to choose Mark as Final, which will just make the workbook read-only. This should discourage people from making changes to the file and also let them know that this is the final draft. Once you make your selection, click OK to confirm, then OK again, and the setting will be applied. Now when someone opens the file, they'll see this little bar at the top of the window, and they won't be able to type or delete anything. If they do need to make changes, they can click the button that says Edit Anyway. In short, this option doesn't provide any actual security. However, it's a good way to keep people from changing or deleting something by accident. Now you know some ways to finalize and also protect your workbook before sending it out to others.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
You may already have some experience using charts and sparklines to visualize data in Excel. Conditional formatting offers yet another way to visualize your data using things like color coding based on the cell's value. In this example, I have the sales figures for a number of different salespeople, and I'd like to find out who's meeting or exceeding their monthly sales goal. Of course, we could just look at the numbers, but it might be easier if they were highlighted somehow, which we can do using a conditional formatting rule. First, select your data, then go to Conditional Formatting on the Home tab. Next, mouse over Highlight Cells Rules, and in this case we're going to choose greater than. Now the sales goal for each person on this list is $4,000 per month. If we enter that number here, you can see in the background that any cell greater than 4,000 is being formatted automatically. If you want, you can even choose a different formatting option. Just click OK when you're done. As you can see, the formatted cells really stand out now, so we can easily tell who's met or exceeded their goal. Looks like August wasn't a very good month, for example, but September and October were much better. Next, let's take a look at some of the conditional formatting presets. We're just going to reselect our data and then go back to the conditional formatting command. You have 3 different types of presets to choose from: data bars, color scales, and icon sets. To learn more about each one, mouse over the options in the menu. Data bars are kind of like bar graphs. The higher the value, the longer the bar in the cell. Color scales, on the other hand, will change the background color based on the cell's value. Icon sets can be used to add different symbols, ratings, and indicators. And you have quite a few styles to choose from, depending on what you need. I think this one's especially easy to read. The icons will help us see which items are the highest and also the lowest when compared to each other. We can also see which ones are about average. You might have noticed that the first rule we applied is still visible, the one that's changing the fill color for cells above 4,000. That's because Excel lets you have multiple conditional formatting rules at the same time, so you can highlight different things. To clear the current formatting rules, just select your cells, then go to Conditional Formatting, and mouse over the option that says Clear Rules. You can clear the selected cells or the entire sheet. In this case, though, I'd just like to remove the greater than 4,000 rule while keeping the rest of the icons. We can do that by going to Manage Rules instead. Here you'll find a list of all the rules that are currently applied to your cells. To remove one, just select the rule you want, then click Delete Rule, and click OK. Conditional formatting is a great tool for visualizing parts of your worksheet. So practice using some of the rules on your own and try combining them to see what they can tell you about your data.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
One of the best things about Excel is the fact that a single worksheet can hold so much information. In fact, you could fill billions of cells if you needed that much room. A file with that much data could get pretty overwhelming, but there's a feature called pivot tables that can help. Pivot tables let you summarize and manipulate your data without actually changing anything in the worksheet. Let's take a look at how they work. In this example, I have some company sales data with columns for the salesperson, region, account, order amount, and month. And I need to find the answer to a very specific question. What is the amount sold by each salesperson? Because each salesperson has data on more than one row, I'd normally have to add these up in order to find the answer. But a pivot table can do this for us automatically, which will make the task much easier. First, you need to select your data. You can just click any cell if it's formatted as a table. Otherwise, you need to select all the cells yourself, and don't forget your column headers. When you're ready, go to the Insert tab, then click the Pivot Table command. You'll usually want to place your pivot table on a new worksheet, so make sure this option is selected. Then click OK, and a new sheet will appear. Over on the left is our blank pivot table. It's okay that there's nothing there yet. To the right is a list of fields that have actually been pulled from our column headers. This is where we control what is or isn't displayed in the pivot table. But before we continue, let's take another look at that question. What is the amount sold by each salesperson? This question tells us exactly which fields to use to find out the answer: salesperson and order amount. All you have to do is check the box next to the field, and it'll be added to one of the areas below, in this case the rows category. Another method is to drag and drop the field into place. We'll put this one under Values. If we go back to the pivot table, now we can see the information we were looking for. In other words, the amount sold by each salesperson. So our question has been answered just by choosing what fields to include. One of the best things about pivot tables is how easy they are to modify, so you can view and analyze different things. Let's say, for example, that you wanted to know each person's monthly sales, not just their total sales. Just drag the month field down here to columns, and this will add a column for each month in the worksheet. If we wanted to know what each region sold, we could take out the month and salesperson fields and then drag region down to rows. So each time we change the fields, the pivot table is just combining the source data in a different way, so we can view the information we need. And we're doing all this without adding or changing anything in the original worksheet. You can even experiment by dragging the fields into different areas, but some combinations work better than others. For instance, if I move order amount over to columns or rows, you can see that it doesn't really give us any useful data. Since order amount contains numerical values, it really does work best in the values area. Finally, if we click the arrow next to order amount and go to Value Field Settings, we can change the function to something other than sum. Instead, we could count the number of cells, calculate the average, or use any of the other options here. Some of these functions will be more useful than others depending on your data, so that's just something to keep in mind. In part 2 of this video, we're going to talk about report filters. We'll also take a look at slicers and pivot charts, which can give you even more ways to work with your pivot table.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Photoshop is a great tool for touching up photos and creating your own graphics, but if you've never used the program before, it can be a bit intimidating at first. Not to worry. In this video, I'm going to go over the basics, including what some of these tools and features are for. I'll also give you tips for setting up your workspace. Let's start by opening an existing image file. Just go to File in the upper left corner, choose Open, then find and select the image you want. In this case, I'm going to use a JPEG that I already have saved to my computer. This is how most Photoshop projects begin. Generally, you're editing something you already have, not starting from scratch. But if you want, you can go to the File menu and choose New to create a blank file instead. As you can see, the image has opened in the center. This is called the document window. It tells you the file name right here, along with the current zoom level. In our example, you'll notice that we're currently viewing the image at about 25% because the original photo is so large. To zoom in, you can press Ctrl+ on your keyboard or Command+ if you're using a Mac. To zoom out, press Ctrl- or Command-. To the left is the Tools panel, which is one of the most important features in Photoshop. This is where you'll select whatever tool you want to use to edit your image. For example, this one lets you add text. And if you click and hold the command, you can access more tools that are similar but slightly different. If a lot of these tools seem unfamiliar right now, that's okay. You'll learn more about them as you get more experience with Photoshop. Let's take a look at the Control panel next. That's the area above your file where you can change the settings for your current tool. The options are specific to whatever tool you have selected, so they'll always be different. Right now we're using the Text tool, so we can change things like the font, font size, alignment, and color. If we select a different tool, you can see that the options change. On the right side of the document window, you'll find a few more panels. The most important one is the Layers panel. Here you can see the different layers in your document and turn them on or off. Right now we only have one layer, the one that's called Background by default, but you could end up with quite a few depending on the project you're working on. You'll get more experience with layers once you start working with images. Finally, there's the menu bar at the top of the screen. Remember, we already used this to open our image file. The menu bar is kind of a catch-all in Photoshop. It gives you access to common file tasks like save, undo, and copy and paste, but it also has commands for editing that aren't on the regular Tools panel. Under Image, for example, you can adjust things like contrast, color, and size. If you go to the Filter menu, you can access advanced tools and effects like Blur and Sharpen. Now that you know your way around, I'd like to show you a few more tips. These might not seem important right now, but they'll come in handy throughout your time with Photoshop. Let's start with ways to customize your workspace by showing, hiding, and moving panels. To show or hide any panel, just go to the Window menu. Then you can click the panel you want. Panels that are currently visible will have a check mark next to them. I think I'm going to turn on the History panel. To move a panel, click, hold, and drag wherever you want it to go. As you can see, you can move panels anywhere in the Photoshop window. If you're just starting out though, we recommend keeping most of the panels in their default position for now. If you ever need to reset your panels, go back to the Window menu, mouse over Workspace, then choose the option that says Reset Essentials. Note that this process may be different depending on the version of Photoshop you're using. For instance, in Photoshop Elements, you'll just go to Window, then Reset Panels. Finally, there's one change we recommend making behind the scenes. It has to do with the type of unit Photoshop uses to measure an image's dimensions. To access the setting on a Mac, go to Photoshop on the menu bar, mouse over Preferences, and then choose Units and Rulers. Now, if you're using Windows, this is going to be found in the Edit menu instead. By default, Photoshop measures dimensions in inches, which is great if you're editing images for print. However, if you're editing for the web, we suggest that you change this to pixels. Then click OK when you're done. And that should do it. Now that you have everything set up and you know how to get around the program, you can start using Photoshop to edit your first image.
Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
In Photoshop, saving works a bit differently from other programs. Instead of working with one main file type, like a document in Word, you'll find several options to choose from, including JPEG, PSD, and more. If any of these formats sound unfamiliar, that's okay. I'm going to tell you more about them over the course of this video. Ultimately, the option you choose just depends on the project. Take this image for example. Here I have a simple photo that I took myself. All I did was crop and rotate it. Now I'd like to send a copy to my friends. A common file type like JPEG or PNG would be a great choice for this. Probably JPEG because that's better for high-quality photos. These file types can be viewed and edited on almost any computer or device, so that makes them perfect for sharing with others. What if you had a photo that you put a little more work into? For example, something with text or adjustment layers. If you only saved it as a regular image, you wouldn't be able to come back and re-edit those things later. Luckily, Photoshop has a special format called PSD that'll preserve your layers and other important info. PSD files can only be opened in Photoshop, so if you plan to share the image, you'll just need to save a copy in one of the common formats too. No matter what format you plan to use, you'll find everything you need under File on the menu bar. If you're saving an image for the first time or saving a new version, you'll generally use Save As. This will give you access to all the common file types, including PSD. This part of the process is pretty simple. Just type a name for your file, then choose where you want it to be saved. If the original file is in the same folder and you don't want it to be overwritten, just make sure to use a different file name. When you're done, go ahead and click the menu here, and you can select the format you want. As you can see, there are lots of options to choose from beyond what we've already talked about, including bitmap, GIF, and much more. In this case, we're going to choose Photoshop, also known as PSD, so we can keep editing the image later if we need to. With this option, make sure Layers is checked, then click the Save button, and that's all it takes. Now you can save your progress anytime by going back to File, then clicking Save. Let's take a look at Save for Web next. This is a really good option if you're planning to post the final image online, for instance on your blog, portfolio, or any other website. All you have to do is click, and you'll be taken to a special dialog box. As you can see, this works a little differently from Save As. You'll still find formats like JPEG and PNG to choose from, but this time you can optimize them for the web. You'll also find other settings that'll help you prep the image for posting. If you go with JPEG, for instance, you can customize the quality level. You may want to experiment with this while you watch the preview on the left. The goal is to find the right balance between quality and a smaller file size. That's what really makes an image suitable for the web. The number below the preview will tell you exactly what the file size is. Now look closely at the tabs at the top of the window. See them up here on the left? If you click the one that says 2 up, you can actually compare your changes to the original image. This is an easy way to make sure you haven't lost too much quality with the options you've chosen. In this example, the images look pretty similar, but the file size on the new version is quite a bit smaller. You can also change the dimensions of your image right here in the dialog box. This can be a good way to reduce the image if you're still struggling with file size. Just enter the width or height that you want, then press Enter on your keyboard, and you can see the effect immediately. When you're ready, go ahead and click Save. Then follow the usual steps of naming the file and choosing a location. Now click Save one more time, and that's it. Ultimately, the saving option you choose will vary from project to project. Sometimes you'll save a copy in more than one format, like we just did here. The best way to go about it is to think ahead and try to imagine what you'll need from the image, both now and in the future. Soon the whole process of saving will start to feel like second nature.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Layers are one of the most important features in Photoshop, so it's important that you understand how they work. Basically, layers let you combine different things in your image, whether it's text, shapes, or other objects that overlap. They can also be used to adjust the image in ways that you may not have realized. Why don't we take a closer look? This image actually has 4 layers. It might help to think of them as transparent panes of glass. When they're stacked on top of each other, they appear to be flat. But if you pull them apart, you can see that they're all working together to create the final image. There are many types of layers in Photoshop, but they fall into 2 main categories: content layers and adjustment layers. Content layers are pretty self-explanatory. They contain some type of object, like text, a graphic or a shape, or even your main image. Adjustment layers are a little different. Instead of containing an object, they have an effect on the layers below. In this example, we have a levels adjustment layer, which is making the cake image just a tiny bit brighter. Adjustment layers are a type of non-destructive editing, meaning they don't actually change anything about the original image, they just sit on top. So you may be wondering, why even use layers? Wouldn't it be easier to just work with everything in your image at once? The truth is, layers are useful because you can work with them independently. That gives you a lot more flexibility and control. Once you get more comfortable with them, you'll use them in your projects all the time. To get started, make sure the Layers panel is visible. It's usually found in the bottom right corner. If you don't have it, you can go to the Window menu to turn it on. If you've never used layers before, we recommend trying an adjustment layer first. Remember, these don't contain any kind of object, they just let you adjust some aspect of your image. That makes them really easy to add and play around with. First, select the layer below where you want the adjustment to appear. In this example, we'll select the cake layer. Next, click the Adjustment button at the bottom of the panel. It's the one that looks like a half-filled circle. Here, you'll find lots of options to choose from depending on what you need. For instance, you could add an effect like posterize, or change the image's color balance. In this case, we're going to choose Hue Saturation to see if we can make the colors a little more vibrant. Once you make your selection, a layer will be added to your document, and the Properties panel will appear. Here you can make your adjustment and see the effect it has on the image in real time. See how it works? The Properties panel might seem confusing at first, but don't worry. You'll learn more about it as you get more experience with Photoshop. For now, it's okay to experiment. When you're done, you can leave this panel open, but in my case, I'm going to close it so we can see the entire image again. There are some other features you should know about that'll make working with layers a whole lot easier. For instance, using the buttons at the bottom of the panel, you can delete your current layer or create a new one from scratch. There's also a way to duplicate layers, which is similar to using copy and paste. To do this, you can right-click the layer you want, then choose Duplicate from the menu, or you can simply drag and drop the layer to the New Layer button here. This will create a copy automatically. I don't really need this though, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Now, one of the best things about layers is how flexible they can be. You can hide them or change the order that they're in, all without making any permanent changes to the image. Hiding a layer can be useful if you want to get it out of the way, for example, so you can edit some other part of the image. All you have to do is click the eye icon next to the layer you want. As you can see, this works for adjustment layers too. Now we're looking at the original photo without any alterations. To turn the layers back on, just click the icons again. The order of your layers also plays an important role in the final image. As you might have gathered, layers at the top of the list always appear in front of layers at the bottom. To change the order of a layer, select the one you want, then drag and drop it into place. Just be mindful of any content that overlaps with the layers below. You might end up covering parts of your image by mistake. Let's go back to the original order, with the cake layer in the background, and the levels layer down here. The last thing I'd like to show you is how to edit the contents of your layers. You can do this using the options in the Tools panel, and also the Filter menu. Every layer is different, so not all tools and filters will work for the layer you have in mind. Still, there are some basic tasks that you can learn that'll definitely come in handy. To get started, select the layer you want to work with. Otherwise, you might end up editing the wrong layer by mistake. Next, click the tool you want to use. We'll choose the Move tool. Now watch what happens when I click and drag on the document. It moves the text layer only because that's the one we have selected. We can do the same with the rings layer. There we go, that looks good. What if you have an adjustment layer and you want to revisit the adjustments you've already made? All you have to do is select the layer and the Properties panel should appear. Now, in my case, I actually closed the panel earlier, so I'll need to double-click the layer icon to reopen it. Now we can make whatever changes we want. I'm just going to adjust the hue again and try reducing the saturation instead. The process for editing text is just as easy. All you have to do is double-click the layer icon. This lets you edit the text directly in the document area. When you're done, press Escape on your keyboard, and that's it. There are lots of different ways to use layers in Photoshop, which is something you'll get a better feel for over time. For now, you know everything you need to get started, including what layers are for and how to work with them in your documents.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Most photos aren't perfect. As you gain more experience with Photoshop, you'll probably start to notice some common problems that you wish you could fix. Luckily, there are ways to do this, even if you're not a seasoned pro. In this video, we're going to cover everything you need to get started, including how to adjust your levels, curves, saturation, and more. Levels let you adjust the shadows, highlights, and midtones in your image, which are things that every image has. Shadows are the darkest parts, highlights are the brightest, and the midtones are everything in between. There are many reasons why you might use a levels adjustment. For example, here we have a photo that's underexposed, which means not enough light was captured when the photo was taken. If we adjust the levels, we can make the midtones and highlights brighter so the details are easier to see. Let me show you how it works. First, go ahead and create an adjustment layer. Make sure to choose the Levels option from the menu. When the Properties panel appears, you should see a graph in the center. This is called the histogram. The histogram shows you data about the shadows, midtones, and highlights in your image. You can make adjustments using the sliders below. Now, this might seem a little strange at first, but don't worry. With some hands-on experience, you'll start to get the hang of it. In our example, we're going to move the highlight slider so it's where the histogram actually ends, and then move the midtone slider a little to the left, which will make the image a bit lighter overall. Every image is unique, so when you start doing this on your own, you will see some big differences between histograms. Basically, the key is to target the endpoints with the shadow and highlight sliders. Then you can adjust the midtones depending on what you need, for example, lighter or darker. Just be careful not to move the sliders too far past the endpoints. This can cause you to lose detail in your image, also known as clipping. As always, if you do end up making a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can just move the slider back or press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z to undo. When you're done, here's a tip that'll let you compare the adjustments to the original image. Just turn the layer on or off using the icon here. See how the original is so much darker overall? In the new version, the sky and the clouds look much brighter, so the subject is easier to see. Similar to levels is a feature called curves. The difference is that curves let you adjust shadows, highlights, and midtones separately. The tool is a bit harder to use, but for experienced users, it does offer a lot more control. Let's take a look at how it works. Just like before, you'll start by adding an adjustment layer. This time, choose Curves. When the panel appears, you should see a diagonal line that has two beginning and end points. This is where you'll make your adjustments. Of course, it looks very different from the Levels interface, but it has the same arrangement of shadows on the left and highlights on the right. To add a point, just click anywhere on the line, then drag up, down, left, or right to see the effect it has. One of the simplest things you can do with curves is to increase the contrast. To do this, you'll need to drag the curve down towards the left, then click to add a second point and drag it up near the right. See how we've created a gentle curve that follows the upward slope of the line? By dragging it down near the shadows and up near the highlights, we've intensified those parts of the image. If we wanted to decrease the contrast, we could just do the opposite. Drag it down here instead, and then up over here. Just be careful to avoid big steep curves that don't follow the slope of the line. As with levels, you can end up losing a lot of detail in your image. While you're still getting the hang of curves, you might want to check out the Presets menu too. Here you'll find lots of built-in options that you can then customize as needed. These can also help you get a better understanding of how the curves interface works. If you ever need to start over, just go back to the menu and choose Default. There are many times when you might want to adjust the colors in your image. With saturation, you can increase or decrease the color intensity, either as a correction or just for artistic effect. Luckily, this is one of the easiest adjustments you can make in Photoshop. All you have to do is add an adjustment layer for hue saturation. Then you can make your changes using the slider here. If the colors in your image are dull or muted, increasing the saturation will make them look more vivid. If you drag the slider in the opposite direction, you can see that it reduces the intensity instead. You can even create a black and white or grayscale image by dragging it all the way to the left. As with levels and curves, you'll want to avoid making extreme adjustments. For example, watch what happens when I drag the slider all the way to the right. Now we've lost a lot of detail in the image, and the colors look pretty unnatural. I'm just going to drag this a little bit back towards the left, and I think that should do it. Of course, this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to making color adjustments. If you go back to the Adjustments menu, you'll find lots of other options to choose from. Vibrance, for example, will up the saturation for parts of your image without oversaturating the parts that are already colorful. Black and white, on the other hand, will give you more control over desaturation. Make sure to check these out when you have some time on your own. Finally, some corrections are harder to pull off than others. Luckily, Photoshop comes with several auto adjustment tools that can help you make specialized corrections in no time. Take this image, for example. See how the snow sort of has a bluish tint to it? To fix this, all we have to do is go to the Image menu, then choose the option that says Auto Color. Now the snow looks white. If you go back to the Image menu, you'll see there are two more auto adjustments to choose from, Auto Tone and Auto Contrast. Another place that you'll sometimes find an auto option is within certain adjustment layers. In general, these can be a great way to improve your image quickly, without much time and effort. You can also just plan to use them as a starting point and tweak the adjustments afterwards to customize them. Whether your image is too light or too dark, too dull or too saturated, you can fix all kinds of common problems in Photoshop. Now you know some tools that can help you improve your images dramatically, including levels, curves, saturation, and more. Now, you probably know how to adjust simple properties in your images, like shadows, highlights, and color. But what if you had something with
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
By now, you probably know how to adjust simple properties in your images, like shadows, highlights, and color. But what if you had something with a less obvious issue? For example, a photo that looked soft, or maybe even a little grainy. Fortunately, Photoshop comes with a number of filters that can help you with something like this. Today I'm going to show you two of them: sharpening and also a feature called noise reduction. Sharpening does exactly what you would think. It can make your images sharper or clearer so certain details are easier to see. It can't fix photos that are blurry or out of focus, unfortunately, but if you have an image that's a bit soft, like this one, it can help. Anytime you're working with filters, it's a good idea to duplicate your layer first so you aren't making changes to the original. Just right-click, choose Duplicate Layer from the menu, and then give it a name. We'll type Sharpen to make it easy to tell the layers apart. When you're done, go up to Filter on the menu bar, then mouse over the option that says Sharpen. Here you'll find a few different filters to choose from. They'll all sharpen your image, but in different ways and to different degrees. We're going to use the one called Unsharp Mask, which may sound a bit weird, but it's exactly what we need. It's very easy to use, and it'll let us customize the results. As you can see, this filter gives you 3 different settings to work with: amount, radius, and threshold. You'll see a preview in the document window as long as this box stays checked. You also have a smaller preview that you can easily reposition. Notice that when you hold this with your mouse, it toggles the preview on and off, which makes it easy to compare the sharpened version to the original. Now, anytime you use sharpening, it's important not to make any extreme adjustments. You can end up doing more harm than good. That being said, it's still okay to experiment, and nothing in Photoshop is permanent. Why don't we get started with the radius setting? Radius controls the size of the details that are being sharpened, so generally it's best to set it to a lower value. Too high, and the edges will start to look unnatural or exaggerated. This is called a halo effect. We recommend something between 0.3 and 0.5 for most images. You can even enter the exact value here. You could go a bit higher if you were working with a higher resolution photo. The amount setting controls the level of sharpness being added. How much you need depends on several different things, including the image size, so it's good to play around with this. This time, if you go too low, the effect on the image may not be strong enough. See how it still looks kind of soft? In this case, I think I'm going to set the amount fairly high, somewhere between 180 and 190. Finally, sharpening has a tendency to make image noise more visible. Those are the tiny little flecks that can make your photo look grainy. You might even see some in the background here. Increasing the threshold can help you reduce this, but you have to be careful. It can cause your sharpening to become inconsistent. Therefore, we recommend leaving this set to 0, unless the filter is creating lots of extra noise for you. So there we have it. I think we're done. The difference is subtle, but it does make the image look a bit more crisp. Once again, you can click and hold the preview to toggle it on or off. When you're satisfied, go ahead and click OK. Noise isn't just caused by sharpening. It can also appear in your image for other reasons. For example, if the photo was taken in lower light. Luckily, you can reduce this using a noise reduction filter. Once again, you'll start by duplicating your layer, so you aren't making changes to the original. You can right-click like before, or just drag the layer down to the New Layer button. Next, go ahead to the Filter menu, then mouse over the Noise option. You'll want to choose the one that says Reduce Noise, and a dialog box will appear. When you apply noise reduction, you're actually removing information from the image, so you have to be careful when using this feature. Removing too much noise can lead to blurriness or loss of detail. The key is to take it one setting at a time and just keep adjusting them until you're happy with the results. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we have strength, which basically controls how much noise reduction is being applied. We recommend starting at the maximum value so you can see your adjustments more easily, but you can always set it to something else later if you need to. Next, we have Preserve Details, which controls how much of the original image is left untouched. You might want to play with this one a bit while you keep an eye on the preview. Choose a setting that's too high, and you'll actually cancel the effects of the filter. But if you go too low, you'll start to lose detail. We're going to shoot for something less extreme, maybe around 5 or 10%. This keeps some of the detail, but also gets rid of a lot of the noise. Sometimes, noise will look like small patches of individual colors. The word for this is color noise. You can mitigate the effect by increasing the reduce color noise setting. Just be careful not to increase it too much, or depending on the image, the colors might start to bleed together. For most images, we recommend a lower setting. I think 40 or 50% should do it for this one. Finally, reducing noise can also cause the image to lose some sharpness. You can add that sharpness back using the Sharpen Details setting. Just like preserve details, increasing this too much can cancel the effects of the filter, so you generally want to aim lower. In this example, we're going to set it to about 10%, which should sharpen it just enough to make a difference. Keep in mind, you can use the same click and hold method to compare the filtered version to the original. If you look closely, you'll see that the difference is pretty slight, but we did manage to reduce some of the noise. As you can see, there are lots of minor problems that you may not have realized you can fix in Photoshop. Now you know how to sharpen your images and reduce image noise using two easy-to-use filters.